Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here to answer a question about ways to preserve cheese. Now, I'm not just going to talk about how I store cheese, but I'm going to throw in a couple other options that are also very popular that other people like to do. Now, before I get into that though, one thing people need to understand is that cheese, long before refrigeration even came to be, had been stored without refrigeration. There are certain places around the world that people still do that because cheese is cultured, and usually when you have something that's cultured, it's rare that it's really going to need refrigeration, but it's still good to store in a cool place even if it's not refrigerated. So they say the optimum temperature is around 50 degrees. So it would have to be a fairly cold room, but it doesn't have to be a refrigerator or a freezer. So with that in mind, one method that I do not do myself, but have no qualms with it, is waxing cheese. This has been done for centuries. People have waxed their cheese and stored it on shelves for years. And let's also remember another thing is that there's fresh cheeses and aged cheeses. There are many cheeses out there that are aged for years before they're cut into and used. So why then does certain entities want to tell you that all cheese must be refrigerated when, especially if you went and bought it, you didn't make it yourself and it had already been aged for at least 14 months? That means when it's aged outside of refrigeration. So just remember that it's cultured, and most ways that you're going to preserve it are going to be pretty safe. And don't let the botulism Nazis scare you. I do have a video I did a couple years ago about botulism where I gave out the actual numbers of how many people get sick with botulism, where they get it from, and it's actually very rarely from home preserved foods, and how many people actually die and what your chances are of dying from botulism. Not saying it's not real. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying we shouldn't practice as safe measures as possible. I'm just saying we shouldn't be living in fear of something that's, less likely to happen to you than walking across the street and getting hit by a car. So waxing cheese is a very popular method, and there's many people that put up food stores that wax cheese and put it on a shelf. So I don't do that, so I don't have any videos on that, but you can do a search on YouTube. I know there's many channels out there that do that. And another fairly popular method is to can cheese of all varieties, be it cheddar or cream cheese. I know I've seen people do videos on this. I don't remember who all they are because I rarely have time to watch other people's YouTube videos. But again, you can do a search, or if you know of a channel that specifically has a video on that, go ahead and list that channel below. If you link to the channel or the video, that comment will automatically go into held for review. You can still do that. Just know that it won't be visible until I have a chance to go in there and approve of that comment. Now, let's talk about what I do as far as preserving cheese for long term. I like to go easy schmeezy. And so for me, when I buy cheese in a whole brick form like this, I just leave it in the package it came in rather than repackaging it, unless of course it's that big huge 5-pound brick that I like to get on occasion from Azure Standard, their organic cheese that they sell. Then I will cut it in half, as you can see pictures here, and store it in containers like that. And the reason why is because I'm not going to go through a whole 5-pound brick in that quick a time, so it's easier for me to cut it in half and then just deal with it 1/2 at a time. But as you can see here, this is some cheddar cheese I just pulled out of the freezer, and then I unwrap it and put it in a container like this. This is the larger rectangular shaped snap lock container, and then I just keep it in my fridge. Once wax cheese, for example, has been cut into, it is still best to refrigerate it or freeze it after that point, because now it's lost that protective layer. So anytime I buy any kind of fresh cheese, it just goes right into the freezer and I don't worry about it. But also, you have to keep in mind, if you do not have a backup power source for your freezer, and that's how you're storing your cheese and butter like I do, then you do want to look into other ways to store cheese, whether it be waxing, canning, or some other things I'm going to talk about here in a bit. Now we have backup sources because we have our solar power, and we have several different types of generators, both gas and diesel generators. So we have different types of backup sources if we have a power outage, which is very, very common here. We have several power outages every single year. Another thing is, if you have a freeze dryer, when it comes to drying cheese, freeze drying is going to be the best to go about it. So you can slice or grate cheese and you can freeze dry it and then store it in jars like this. Now I don't have a freeze dryer. One of these days I'll do a video on why I don't and why I probably never will get a freeze dryer. It's all a matter of personal choice and where you choose to put your money as an investment. You can put it into a freeze dryer, or you can put it into something else, or you can put it into stocking up on freeze-dried foods. Yes, in the long run, if you like to put up a lot of freeze-dried foods, a freeze dryer will be a good idea. But anyway, I'll go into more detail about that in a separate video. But anyway, since this is dated 2018, this means this would have been the cheese I was getting from Honeyville. So I get it in the number 10 cans. I don't buy from Honeyville anymore for a few reasons, but this cheese I would have bought back farther than that. So probably up until around 2016, I was still buying Honeyville, and then I switched. So anyway, this cheese has been in these jars like this since 2018, and this is freeze-dried cheese. The great thing about getting freeze-dried grated cheese is not only is it super tasty straight out of the can or jar in this case, you can have many uses and it can stay preserved for a very long time. So even if you're having to purchase it in a number 10 can, but you're like, I'm not going to be able to work through this whole can in such a quick amount of time, what I would do is I would open the can and then put the cheese into separate jars and then vacuum seal the jars. So this jar right here has a food saver top on it because I need to re-vacuum seal it because I opened it just so I could take the thumbnail photo for this video, because I like having stuff like that. I think visually it just looks better. And also to get a taste of it to see how it tastes after sitting in the jar for 3 years, still good. So when I vacuum seal, I can either use my food saver top and my brake bleeder pump. If I have a food saver machine, which I do not any longer, I've been through 4 of them and I'm done with them because they break down every 2 years. Then I can hook it up to this. But my preferred method is to use a brake bleeder pump like I have here. I'll make sure that I have a link to this one down below. And you can use this tip. There's other tips that will actually go into the top and hold into place. So however you want to do it, I just press and hold this into place. And this is the one thing I tend to forget to show people, is that I don't pump like this. So if you have weak hands like I do, or you have arthritis, I believe you could still use this. Just make sure you're resting it against the counter so that you still have to hold it, but I don't have to squeeze it. I just pump downwards like this. So I'm actually using my arms to vacuum seal, and then you just keep going. I used to say pump until it gets up to the 15 or the 400 on the gauge. If I'm going to go by the numbers, I go past that, or I just keep pumping until the needle stops moving altogether. And that's usually the best way to go about it. It doesn't matter. You're not going to implode your jar if you keep pumping, because it will stop once it'll reach a point where it's just going to stop moving. And then pull the top off, and now my jar is vacuum sealed. Now I always make sure that I check by lifting it by the lid before I put the band on to put it back into storage. And then another method I can use with the brake bleeder pump, you'll see I have a second brake bleeder pump that I keep hooked up to my chamber, is the vacuum chamber. Now this is something I'll use when I'm vacuum sealing into recycled jars like this, where these kind of tops won't properly fit. Now this will slide over that, but it's not going to get the tightness to properly vacuum seal. So then I can take this and put it in the chamber that Patrick makes and sells on our store. And by the way, if you go to check out the store, our Etsy store link is always in the description box right at the top, and you don't see them in there, it just means that we're temporarily sold out. They kind of go through spurts where they sell quickly, and then we have to try to restock parts, and sometimes that's not always easy, especially now. So just be patient and keep watching. That's one thing you can do anyway, is either freeze dry your own cheese or buy it, and it'll keep for many years, especially if you can keep it in the cans for as long as possible. So I only open a can when I need it, and I mostly keep that cheese for long-term storage and don't try to use this up. That's for more emergency, because if we keep it in the cans like that, they will last for at least 25 years, especially if you keep it in a cool place. Cans are already dark, so you don't have to worry about the light as much. But still keeping it cool, no matter what the food is best when you're talking about food storage. And now another way I like to put cheese up for long term is in the form of cheese powders. But it can be difficult to find really good ones that don't have added ingredients when you're talking about cheese powders. Even in my favorite brands like Hoosier Hill Farm and Judy's. I tried both, and I did read the ingredients before I purchased both, and I decided I'd go ahead and try them. The white cheddar powder in the Hoosier Hill had less added ingredients and less of the ingredients you're trying to avoid than their colored cheese powder, but it still has citric acid. Now, if you're wondering why that's an issue, I'll go ahead and link to the video I did on citric acid down below. Now, a lot of these types of ingredients are the kinds that are generally recognized as safe, which means if you overdo it, they can be harmful to your health. So, though I think these things can have a place in your food pantry, just for some added flavor, I really think they should be limited in their use. And so these are something I don't use a lot. And I decided to go ahead and try the Judy's just to compare it. Both are really good. I actually like the flavor of this one better because it's not as salty. But even Judy's, though it has less ingredients than the Hoosier Hill Farm, it still has disodium phosphate, which is another one of those GRAS, G-R-A-S, generally recognized as safe. So it's not something you should be consuming on a regular basis. I haven't looked hard enough to see if there's any out there that don't have those kind of ingredients in them. These two brands are usually pretty good at having products, dried dairy products, that are just that. And for example, the Hoosier Hill Farm cream cheese powder doesn't have any of that in it. And both brands in their whole milk powder or sour cream powder or whatever it is just have that in it, just whole milk, nothing else added. And so that's why I really like them. So I'm thinking when it comes to certain types, it's a little trickier, but I do recommend the cream cheese powder from Hoosier Hill Farm. I know that Judy's also makes one. I haven't tried that one yet. Both are great brands. Both of them can usually be found through the Subscribe and Save as well on Amazon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link to Judy's storefront and to Hoosier Hill Farm storefront so you can browse through what they have. And I'm still always trying new products by them. But anyway, the powdered cheeses can be one way that you can put something up for long term. Now, I still have some of these in these containers. The nice thing, even though they're plastic and they're clear, the nice thing about these is these do stack well and stack nicely against each other. But if you really want to get them out of plastic, you can still do the same method by using glass jars, half-gallon, quarts, whatever it is. Put your powders in them and vacuum seal. You just want to make sure you put some kind of barrier over the top of the powder before you vacuum seal, so that the powder doesn't get sucked up under the lid and then prevent it from sealing. And then, of course, making sure that your lids and your jar tops rims are clean and dry when you go to seal. Oh, and then the Judy's. I really like Judy's because it comes in this type of package which is going to keep it for a very long time. It keeps it so it's not exposed to light as your containers like this are. And it does have a zipper, but I have this right here. I like to use the stainless steel clothespins. I'll add that on there too, so I don't have to repackage it, and this should stay good. But again, you can still put this in jars if you'd prefer. I have a lot of Judy's milk powder that I keep in the packages they came in, and they're they keep just great in these. And it's all whole milk powder. I don't store any of that non-fat garbage, because not only does it taste like garbage, if you're going to do dairy products, you should be looking at the whole product and not something like certain popular brand names where they strip all the fat out just to put unhealthy fats back in, like canola or soy or whatever. So just make sure you're reading the ingredients when it comes to buying any of these. Now, if you're really like, gee, I would like to have cheddar cheese powder, but I don't want to cave and buy the ones that have those added ingredients, well, you can always get a freeze-dried cheese or freeze-dry your own cheese if you have a freeze dryer, and then just powder it up yourself by putting it in a blender or a coffee grinder that you have specifically set aside for powdering things. And then you can have a cheese powder that will work great for making macaroni and cheese sauces, and so on. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.